Hi, it's Kai. Number 8. Tupac. Tupac Shakur was one of the most important rappers of his generation. Still is, actually, and I don't say that lightly. He came from the East Coast, but then went to the West and helped move the rap movement in a big way. So much so that his music was described as transcendent, and everyone was talking about it, including politicians who were trying to get it banned. However, on September 13, 1996, a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas led to Tupac's death. Or did it? If you go through the events of both the night of and the day after, you might get the feeling that not everything is lining up. For example, in the car with Tupac that day was Suge Knight, a rapper and producer with a tenuous history at best. Tupac was documented as getting shot multiple times, yet Suge Knight, who was right next to him, didn't have a scratch. Curious. Fast forward a bit, and Tupac was alive on the scene when police got to him, and multiple reports state that he was lucid and talking when he was at the hospital, and yet he died there. Which, to be fair, isn't too odd, as conditions can worsen in the blink of an eye. What really trips people up is that the funeral was supposed to be an open casket service for people to pay their respects, and yet it was changed last minute to a private service, and Tupac's body was not only not seen, but it was cremated. Suge Knight said he paid $3 million for his cremation, but the cremator mysteriously disappeared shortly after. Tupac performed under the alias Machiavelli towards the end of his career. This was the name he went by when he released his last album of his career. One of Machiavelli's ideas on how to trick your enemies was to fake your own death and then come back when they least expect it. A prince who wishes to achieve great things must learn to deceive, he wrote. And if you rearrange the letters in the name Machiavelli, it can spell Am Alive, K, or Mac Alive. Interesting. As you can see, this is a very comprehensive belief into why some people believe Tupac is alive. But then the question becomes, where did he go? The answer that honestly makes the most sense is that he went to Cuba. Why? Because his aunt, who was a member of the Black Panther Party who was smuggled out of the country, lives there and would help him adjust to his new life, much like she did. There are others who say he's in witness protection by the government. As to why Tupac might have faked his own death, the theories are numerous, not the least of which was that this point in rapper history was incredibly violent due to the East Coast-West Coast war going on, and perhaps Tupac wanted to get out before things got worse. Or, as suggested by conspiracy theorists, perhaps he went into witness protection because he could testify to things that the other rappers did. It's hard to say what the real reason is. But despite there being ample evidence that he is dead, people still believe he might be alive, and even try to make movies proving that he's alive. If he is alive, this would be one of the greatest escape acts in human history. What do you think? Number 7. Elvis. One of the biggest conspiracy theories of all time is that Elvis Presley faked his death on August 16, 1977. To be honest, his death was a big blow to many, not the least of which was the entire music industry, because even at that point in time, Elvis was still the king of rock and roll. So for him to go from that to gone was unfathomable at the time. This is where a lot of theories started that stated that he faked his own death. For example, some believe that Elvis was connected to the mafia and that he had to fake his death in order to escape. The author of the 1988 best-selling book Is Elvis Alive? By Gail Brewer Giorgio recalled a recent interview with Time, how she went through thousands of FBI documents to come to the conclusion that Presley was an American hero who had to go into witness protection. Gail, who is now 78, said the FBI enlisted Presley as an undercover agent in 1976 to help the agency infiltrate a criminal organization called the Fraternity, which was apparently made up of dozens of racketeers and other criminals. Elvis volunteered, spurred by respect for the FBI and love for America, according to Gail. The author said the agency came to him because a member of the fraternity supposedly had dealings with Presley over the sale of an airplane the singer had. But when Presley was found to be a mole, he was put into the witness protection program, Gail said, citing what she said was evidence from FBI interviews and documents. Elvis faked his death because he was going to be killed and there was no doubt about it, Gail said. There have also been numerous Elvis sightings that have been going on for decades. If he was alive, he'd be 86 today, and he would have been the creator of one of the greatest hoaxes in the history of the world. What do you think? Is the king of rock and roll still alive? Number 6, Raymond Roth. It's not just famous people that fake their own deaths. Regular people like you and I apparently do it too. If you were trying to compile a list as to why someone would go and fake their death, there are a few reasons that might come to mind. For safety, to start over, and to scam people. And for Raymond Roth, he decided to do the latter. He conspired with his son to claim that he was missing after going out for a swim near where he lived. Naturally, a manhunt came about and people looked high and low for him, but he wasn't found. The reason he wasn't found is that he didn't go swimming at all. Rather, he went to a timeshare down in Florida. The intent of the scheme was that the two would be able to collect the $410,000 life insurance policy that was taken out on him. Naturally, he was eventually caught and brought back to face charges of conspiracy, among other things. Rather curiously, though, not only did he not go on the straight and narrow after his arrest, he got arrested again later on for trying to impersonate a cop while kidnapping women. His son also faced charges in the case. He pleaded not guilty to insurance fraud, conspiracy, and falsely reporting an incident, and was later freed on bail. What do you think of this guy that faked his own death to collect on an insurance policy? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 5, Tsar Alexander I. The idea of members of the Russian royal family throughout the years having mysterious deaths and appearances is nothing new, especially in the story of Anastasia, where people thought she was alive for decades, even though she was dead. However, with Tsar Alexander I, grandson of Catherine the Great, the story is a bit different. Because analysis both during the time of death and later more modern looks at handwriting samples from the time seem to indicate that the head of Russia faked his death so that he could go and be, of all things, a monk. Now, to be fair, even back when this faking happened, certain people were curious as to what was going on. Because officially, Tsar Alexander I died of typhus in 1825, and then, out of the blue, 11 years later, a monk named Fyodor Kuzmich emerged and appears to look exactly like the late Tsar, even carrying himself with an air of nobility, in fact. Funnily enough, Alexander's wife is also believed to have faked her death and become a nun, known as Silent Vera. Number 4, Michael Jackson. It's been almost 12 years since the death of Michael Jackson, and the world is still mourning the loss over the King of Pop, mainly because he was about to do a major tour known as This Is It, and many were excited to see him on stage once again doing everything that they love to see him do, sing and dance. And yet, on June 25th, 2009, he died, and the world mourned the loss of a singing icon. But not unlike a certain king before him, there were many who felt that he faked his own death for one reason or another. And ever since his death, and the many years that followed, there are some who claim to have seen Michael Jackson alive. So let's ask the obvious question: why would he fake his death? Well, there are two main answers here: money and reputation. According to many, Michael Jackson was almost broke, which was why he was going to go big with This Is It, in order to get back some of what he needed to survive. However, there are also growing rumors about his relationship with young boys, and after his death, documentaries about these accusations came to light and forever stained the king of pop's legacy. Perhaps Michael Jackson knew things like this were coming and used what resources he had to fake his death. Or perhaps he's really gone. That does seem like the more likely solution, doesn't it? Number 3. Jacquot de la Haye. Faking your own death has been going on for hundreds of years. Depending on if you believe her origin story, Jacquot de la Haye was someone who had to take care of herself because no one else would or could. Her mother apparently died in childbirth, and her father was killed. As such, she had to take care of not just herself, but her brother, who happened to be mentally disabled. Now, this is where things get interesting, because she allegedly existed back in the 17th century and decided that the best course of action for her life was to become a pirate. Female pirates were not uncommon, but they had to be made of special stock to not just command boats at the time, but have the respect of the men they worked alongside. De la Haye had that and more, and apparently became one of the few true pirate queens of the world. But she got captured, and as a result, had to fake her death in order to break free. After doing that, she lived life as a man for a while, and then went right back to pirating with her crew, even capturing an island in the Caribbean for herself and her crew. The key thing to note here is that while Jacquot de la Haye is a legend, there's no actual proof she lived. But if she did, it would be very fair to say the phrase, "What a woman." Number 2, Timothy Dexter. In terms of true history, Timothy Dexter might honestly have one of the more curious lives ever lived, for both good and bad reasons. At one point in time, he was very poor and had to drop out of school at just 8 years old, which at that time meant a life of hard labor in order to just survive. But by a stroke of luck, he made some wise investments based on the dollar of the time period. He lived for the most part in the 18th century and was able to become one of the wealthiest people in all of Boston. Talk about a come up. The problem, though, was that while both he and his eventual wife were rich, they were never really accepted by the rich elite at the time. Furthermore, the money went to Dexter's head in the worst way, and he started to get things to boost his wealth, including a statue of himself, and demanded that his servants refer to him as Lord Dexter. He was obviously incredibly desperate for attention. And this is where his faked death comes in, because he was so vain and hated by many that he decided to fake his own death just to see what people really thought about him. He let his family in on the act and then attended his own funeral to see what people would say. People didn't really like him, though, so when he honestly died 6 years later, you can bet he wasn't that happy. Number 1, William Goodwin Geddes. In Australia, there lived a man named William Goodwin Geddes, and he was known for many things, not the least of which was his athletic and swimming abilities. But on November 29, 1877, the unthinkable happened, and he drowned in King John's Creek in Queensland. According to the story given at the time, Geddes was with a friend who heard him cry for help, and said friend also tried to dive after him, but his attempts didn't succeed. In the eyes of the family of Geddes, there was still some doubt as to whether he was really dead, and yet the life insurance policies that were taken out on him were paid out a few months later. Fast forward to 1899, and a man was brought into an insane asylum by the name of Louis Sidney Brenham. The problem? He looked exactly like William Goodwin Geddes, and there was even a police officer who recognized him, even though Geddes' parents said that this wasn't their son. What really happened is still a bit of a mystery, but it more than likely shows that Geddes faked his own death in order to get the money from his life insurance policies and live a new life. Thanks for watching. Do you think any of these people really did fake their deaths? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye.